Museum of Industrial History. My name is Katie Ryman and I'm the Manager of Education and Public Programming here at the museum. In the lead up to our annual Steel Weekend on October 11th and 12th this year, here at the museum, we are pleased to have Dr. Joshua E. Long, PhD. He's a conductor, performer, researcher, teacher, and technician, presenting today on the Bethlehem Steel Company Band, an ensemble that was created in 1910 as a gift to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And he will be sharing about the musicians who practiced in a dedicated, fully equipped hall with many amenities made for band members who provided a wealth of music making for the community. And during Steel Weekend this year, we are excited to have the Bethlehem Steel Legacy Band, conducted by Dr. Long, performing on Sunday, October 12th at 2 p.m. here at the museum, continuing that rich history of band music and its importance in our communities. We hope you all can come back for that wonderful performance. And now please join me in welcoming Dr. Long. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, so happy that all of you are here. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story about the Bethlehem Steel Company Band. I do always say this disclaimer in the beginning. I'm excited if you have family members who've played in this band. I'm still trying to get more of the story of this great group, and so I can share it and get it archived for future audience members, because I think that's what the coolest thing is about music making. As you see in the background there, I know the picture is a little bit fuzzy, as you can see there, of the way my presentation looks, but this is actually the band performing at the steel plant outside where the train cars used to be. At one time, if you're familiar with the history there, the train cars and the tracks used to be a little bit closer and run more in the middle, and then they eventually moved over to where they are now. So it's kind of neat to see how the band was performing there. So as most of you know, since we're standing on the property of Bethlehem, of the steel works, May 1881 was the start of the steel plant. Back then it went through a bunch of different names: Salkin Iron Company, Bethlehem Rolling Mill and Iron Company, Bethlehem Iron Company, and then obviously Bethlehem Steel Company. What's neat about it is it emerged over the years, as most of you know and have been here and have seen it, and where it is even today, knowing that obviously it's not around anymore, but the facets and all the buildings and a lot of where it's grown is still around, and we can still enjoy it for today. I want to talk about this gentleman. He was very much Charles M. Schwab. I always joke he's not the financial guy that you know, being he was the president of the steel company plant. And I want to talk a little bit about him. I always say this, and there's no perceptions here if it's going to be, I always say it's a love or hate situation. And what I mean by that is, I'm not here to talk about him of what he did positively or negatively, but rather to share a little bit about him and what he did offer in this band, which is kind of cool. So as you can see on the screen, he was part of Andrew Carnegie's steel program back then, which is now what was U.S. Steel in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was an engineer. He went through, at age 35, he became president of that Carnegie Steel Company. And what's interesting to me is what he calls himself the very well-made man, okay? So he came from not having much money in his life to having all these presidential kind of feel in the steel plant and also making money. He had many different places in Loretto, Pennsylvania, New York City, and in here in Bethlehem. He liked to gamble. He was very flamboyant. He flavored though in a lot of music performances, which is what we're going to talk about today. So even though, again, I always joke about that life-hate situation, some people didn't like how he provided for the area. And some people did, because he was providing for the area and providing jobs and so on and so forth. So some of his philosophical things that he did for other people were such things as, if you're familiar with Penn State, obviously being in Bethlehem, There's a Schwab Auditorium, which he gave money to. There's also the Bethlehem Steel FC, which is a football club. Now, I'm going to back up and say, think about the European style of thing. It is a soccer group. And I believe today, Bethlehem FC is back as far as in the community, they use that name for soccer. But he brought this team. They had 6 American Cups, 5 National Challenge Cups. I mean, it was a big deal. It was a big competitive circuit. This was all what I'm going to start saying is benefits to the workers here in the steel plant and to the area. The other thing that most of you probably are familiar with is the Bach Choir. The Bach Choir was going on at this particular time, and I know it still is happening yet today. The Bach Choir was funded by Schwab a lot of times, and a lot of his performances, he used the Bach Choir, which I'm going to get to in a second. So this piece that you're seeing up in the left-hand corner, The Steel King, was a piece written by Floyd St. Clair, and he was the director of the Edgar Thomas Steel, which was part of Carnegie Steel, US Steel. And at age 35, as I said earlier, Carnegie had this steel band there going on. And so what the band I'm going to talk about here today was already something he had done already at a different steel plant, obviously, in the Pittsburgh area. But I'm going to talk about Floyd St. Clair, Johnstown, Pennsylvania composer, so Pennsylvania composer. He was the director of the Edward Thomas Steel Works Band, which was founded by Schwab, and he created this piece and he dedicated it to Charles Schwab. And what is neat about it is this piece was also heard in Bethlehem at the beginning and the birth of the Bethlehem Steel Company Band. So I'm going to play you a little clip from this so you can kind of hear it. It's a typical, what we call two-step march. Marches in music and in Americana are very much to get people moving. We always think about it as being a parade situation, which they are used quite a bit, but actually this particular march was provided for more of a concert setting. A lot of my fellow historians talk about how marches should get you dancing and feeling that way. But anyway, here's a little clip from the Steel King by Floyd St. Clair. So that particular piece, I always say this, John Philip Sousa style band music, Stars and Stripes Forever, which everybody seems to know. Similar kind of style, feel, sounds to it. So to give you kind of an idea, it was dedicated to him and it brought a lot of great comfort and obviously brought to Bethlehem. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Talk really quickly about the Bach Choir of Bethlehem. As you see right here, this is in South Bethlehem, PA. Dr. Fred Wool is seated in the front row. Most of you are familiar probably with this Bach Choir. And again, I'm not here to talk about the Bach Choir, but I bring this up because Schwab helped funded this particular choir, and I find it great that it's still kind of in our tapestry here at Bethlehem. And also still performing, so it's really neat. I will point this out because this is always a question I get. You will see in this picture here that there is men and women in the choir. Reason I say that is a lot of what you're going to see in the pictures of the band is all men, and I will talk about that in a little bit too. But you also have to think about how of the times of that particular time that band folks were mostly men. I mean, that's not today, but just kind of pointing that out. So it's kind of neat to see this. I always like to point those different things out. What we're going to talk about is, and what I'd like to discuss is an industrial band. Okay, an industrial band means the following to me. Most of you might already know what a concert band at a high school is. So I'm talking about the woodwinds, the brass, the percussion instrument band that actually performs at a high school on stage with a conductor. Well, back in the early days, this wasn't really happening in the schools quite yet. It was more in the militaries. So military being like the today of Marine Band and the US Army Band, those kind of things, okay? So what was neat is the golden age of American bands was happening, meaning that the military had these bands, John Philip Sousa had these bands, everybody enjoyed coming to these concerts because it was cool to hear music. Yes, back before the days of cell phones and all our good old electronics where we can watch this anytime we want, that wasn't happening. So people would go to concerts. Now I know, and I'm so gracious that people still go to concerts, but I always say it this way, that was the only time you could hear music. So communities loved bands. Communities wanted bands in their communities. So there was community bands, there was high school bands, there was church bands, and then there was industrial bands. So why I'm saying an industrial band is typically with an industrial band, you had to be a part of the industry to be in that band. And as you see up here, I have on the screen, here's a few, I'm not going to go through all of them, of industrial bands, but we have the American Cast Iron Pipe Company Band in Alabama. We have the Cadillac Motor Car Company Band in Detroit. We have the Emsling Works Band. We have the Bozeman Mill Company Band. And I do have another picture here. The Lukens Iron and Steel Band, which was in Coatesville, Pennsylvania. The New York Central Railroad Band in Jersey Shore, Pennsylvania. And again, that's not, they called it Jersey Shore, but it's about middle of the state where the railroad car shops were there, and they had a band for that particular endeavor there. So what I'm getting at is these industrial bands, you had to be involved with it. And what I think is kind of cool is back in the day when these industrial bands were were thriving, such as Bethlehem Steel, if they needed a clarinet player, they would hire a clarinet player for their band, and then we'll get them to do something in the industry. So think about that for a second. Hiring somebody to play in your band, but then we'll have you do something in the industry. So think of it that way. This actually still happens today. If you're familiar with the Salvation Army Band, I have a good friend of mine who's a euphonium player. He was hired to play in their band, and he does marketing for Salvation Army, but every time you talk to him, I was hired to play in the band, but I also do some marketing in Salvation Army, which is great. But think about that, this is what was starting to happen with the Bethlehem area, and what we have is the first concert of the Bethlehem Steel Company Band. So back in December 22, 1910, this was a Christmas present to the community by Charles M. Schwab. The band performed the first time in his office building where there was a Christmas party for the staff, for the steel workers of this area. There was over 200 people that was at this at this Christmas party, and he showed the band and was just so proud to have this band for this area. What was also interesting about it is that band also marched the next day in a parade as well for the rest of the community that was not at the party. So this is the picture here. It's a little grainy, but it's one of his pet organizations, and I use that word pet, all right, because I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. with a steel, and he finds another chance for his effort towards musical achievement. And he was showing this band as being so prestigious and so great for the community. And of what I've heard, I mean, I wish there was recordings of it that I could find. I heard it was. I mean, it was a great band. They had wonderful musicians, wonderful people, and they made great music, and they performed all over the place, which we'll talk about in a second. So here's the original band member roster, and this was in a newspaper in Bethlehem that I found. I'm not going to go through all the names, but you can see from the director to the drum major, they had instruments, and I'll talk really quickly about it. Cornets, back in the day, if you're familiar with the modern day trumpet, and I don't have a picture, but a cornet is more of a softer European style side of a trumpet that plays a little bit of a darker sound. Back in the day, there was cornet players. Today, we usually play mostly trumpet that you will see in the schools. We have horns and altos, and this would be the French horns, okay, just to point that out. French horns, I have a lot of colleagues who, French horns were actually made in Germany, so some argue that, and this is for another conversation, some argue that, well, French horns, it should be called a German horn, and some people just call it a horn, because I think the reason why I got the name was it's so fancy with the circles, so it's French. Again, that's what I heard. But anyway, baritones, which is a low brass instrument, and I actually play a baritone. Trombones, basses being tubas, clarinets, saxophones, one piccolo, one oboe, one bassoon, and the battery at the end there with all the names would be your percussion instruments. So your bass drum, your cymbal, your snare drum, those kind of thing. This was publicized in the newspaper as "Come see Schwab's new band," and it was called Schwab's Band, not the Bethlehem Steel Company Band, which is what the name of it was called, Schwab's Band at the time. So if you ever come across any history with that. I want to talk about Andrew, aka Andre Weingartner. He was an immigrant from Hungary. He came over to this country for the beginning to be a studio musician. So he was a studio musician. Back in the day, he was at Moravian Seminary, which is Moravian College now, or maybe Moravian University. I'm sorry, back in my days. His father was an agricultural machinery, which I kind of find funny because he was the director of this industrial band. So he was familiar with the industry. He went to military school. He finished with a gentleman out of New York. Just like John Philip Sousa, he was a violinist. And I always bring this up, that it's neat to hear a musician who played a string instrument, who was the conductor of the band, who those instruments were not in the band. And for those of you who are familiar with music or music education today, and I will proudly say I call myself a band guy, I play the instruments that are in the band, and it's funny to me that back in the day, the violinists were the ones who were conducting the bands with no violins and no cellos or basses in the band. So it's kind of neat. He came over, he was the Lehigh Valley Orchestral Director in the beginning. He later in his life was at Stroudsburg and East Stroudsburg High School and was the band director, but he was offered this job to be the director of the Bethlehem Steel Company Band. And what's really interesting to me is his status changed from being a studio musician to a director of an industry band. And they made a big deal about that in the newspapers and in publications that I found. Schwab at the time got musicians together. They started rehearsing at a local hotel. Then he buys this place. This is the Weaver's home. It was the band headquarters. And I know this picture looks a little grainy, but it was a Joseph Weaver home in 1910. He started renovating this place into a colonial style home. And what was neat is it became the band's clubhouse. And I say clubhouse because, as you can see here, classic colonial style Greek porch, yellow design paint, mahogany floors, fancy rugs, oak accents, fireplace, formal curtains, spatial balconies, game areas, shuffleboard, card tables, fully equipped kitchen, uniform, locker room with baths in the basement. Now to us, in this day and age, okay. But to folks back then, in 1910, what a place. I mean, seriously, like what an interesting place for a band to rehearse, okay? He took, added an addition to it. This is a grainy picture of the concert hall. I have a picture. I just always like to show this because this is what was in the newspapers, but that's what it looked like. That's what the rehearsal hall looked like inside. And for most of you, you're probably saying, oh, it looks just like an older school building. And you're exactly right. Of the time, we have enough space. You have enough space to set up, instruments, a piano, those kind of things, and then obviously all the repertoire and all the fancy stuff in the room. But it was the place to be. It was their clubhouse. Musicians really wanted to go to this facility to rehearse. They wanted to be there. He wanted to entice the members to come and perform within this building. Here's some of the performances I want to share, some of the pictures that I found over the time. And like I said, this is just a snapshot of what pictures and what performances that they did do back in the day. But this is the Salkin plant in 1918. You can see this was right at noon when lunchtime. The band is performing in the middle up there. I know it's a little grainy, and everybody else is standing around the side to hear the music. So while on lunch, the steel workers were able to hear the music and hear the band. This was the 1950 semi-centennial of South Bethlehem at the Wilbur Trust Company building. The band is up on the balcony up at the top, if you can see right there. The band was performing for the audience, was performing for the community, was providing for the semi-centennial of South Bethlehem. I know also there was a clock dedication going on at that time, which the band gave money to, as well as Charles Schwab gave money to. So, and I say the band because he was trying to push the band to be its own entity for the workers and for the steel plant here that did exist. Here's another one of, I don't know, 1914. We're not sure if it's 1914 or 1918, but this is Asbury Park, New Jersey, where the band was on the boardwalk at that particular time. The band did perform in other places. They were seen at a welcome home for Charles Schwab in Loretta, Pennsylvania, at his house, which I know is now a seminary. They would go and perform there. They would go into New York City quite a bit. I don't know if they were on his train car or how they got there. That's what I don't know. But I'm assuming they all traveled together, and I'm assuming that he would always bring them to all his events. Here's a list of performances that I find. It's a very long list. And if you are interested, I can supply this to you. But to give you some idea of some of the performances they had was a well-received of August 1914 in Central Park, New York. We have the building of the clock installation, which I was talking October 2nd through the 10th, somewhere in there in 1916. There was annual Halloween parties from 8 to 11 that I found. There was the unifying of the Bethlehems at the Coliseum on Broadway, that they performed for that. Educational parades. They also, as you can see here, played for the head of the Liberty Loan Parade in New York City. They also played for an outdoor performance in Philadelphia with the Salvation Army. As you can see, December 5th, it's right there, Mrs. Kenneth Kemmerer was at Bethlehem's high school at that particular time. This was before the two high schools that we have currently. The band was playing there and doing performances. Like I said, November 1919, performing at the Schwab Summer Home, Saucon Valley Country Club. So as you can see, the band was everywhere. All right, and this is probably a very small, short list of probably what really happened, and that's why I keep saying, if you have more information, please let me know if you're watching this or if you're here today. So I want to talk a little bit about the formation of the band and kind of when this all happened at the same time. This is, to me, a sad thing. I mean, it's life and things happen, right? But in 1909, 21 of the 9,184 workers at this steel plant died at the plant, and 927 were seriously injured. Conditions weren't the greatest, okay? A lot of you probably who are in the history probably can contest to this. They got overworked. They were tired of the safety. I'm talking the workers. They went on strike. They were working 7 days a week. And what they wanted was they wanted to have off on Sundays, of what I know, so they could have a religious holiday. Well, 1910, they went on a 108-day strike. They wanted 8-hour work days. They wanted safe conditions. They did a 5-hour parade to protest. During this time, Schwab's answer was, they'll be back when they get hungry. And that was his attitude. Because he figured that, you know, he is doing a strong economic field here in Bethlehem. And if people want this industry, they'll be back. I read things in the newspaper that he said he would move the plant if it came to that. Not here to put my 2 cents about it, but that's what I read. It was a back and forth, and it got heated, as you can probably contest to. So when this got heated, they got the Cossacks, which was the newly formed Pennsylvania State Police, came into this area because things were a mess in Bethlehem. There was fights, there was arguments, and so on and so forth. And I like to talk about Joseph Zambo, which is a very sad, sad story. This gentleman, it's not sure if he was involved with the protests, with the fights, or what was going on. He was getting wine for his pregnant wife at the Majestic Hotel in Bethlehem. And he went in there, and there was a riot that emerged. And there was guns that went off. And he got killed. And it's not sure if it was something to the effect of he started it or what was going on, but what was sad about it is even in the newspaper they made a big deal that his son was born that day. So everyone was outraged. The police thought it was an act of terrorism. The town even went even more crazy about what was happening. There is an information placard on 3rd and Pierce Streets in Bethlehem, in case you ever see those blue signs that talk about the story. So you can still go see that today. That's just a picture that I had from that. But this is what Charles Schwab does. He gave them some of the demands. He worked out a few things after this point. And this is where all the other stuff starts coming into play. He hires J. Fred to return from California to work at the Bach Choir. He starts a financial backing for musical organization. He starts giving employees gifts. He starts feeling that he needs to do something to help this community get over this and move on from all that happened. People did go back to work. Resuming of steel making. The Bethlehem Steel Company Band comes. So I always kind of say this, and I'm not here to judge, and I'm not trying to be a negative connotation here, but was it for promotion? Was it for community? He always made a comment that he was going to have 100 of the finest members to be in this band, which, believe it or not, Lehigh University has the Marching 100, right? So I don't know if that's where that 100 comes from. But he was very strong about making sure that he was doing something for the community. And that's where I want to focus our attention on, not exactly what happened with the riot or what happened with the band, but this was created. The reason why I say, was it a promotional thing, is I always ask, did he, this band was everywhere. Was he just promoting Bethlehem Steel with the band? Was that the only point? Because I still remember, I read something in the article one time, like when this came to, when the band started, was born, I say, he made a comment that it has to be the best band in the world. It has to be the best band. And if it's not, we're not going to have it. and that was his attitude. He started giving people bonuses for being in the band. Right here, you can see Russell Scheimer's 1914 bonus. He was given $50 for faithful service and attendance. So he was at every attendance for every band rehearsal that they had. He got an extra $50. So I always say it this way, you know, I'm not trying to be negative about him. I think it's great that he was giving back to the community. I think his attitude, his ideas of how he wanted to do something for the community and provide music was where I put my 2 cents. Because in today's world, even today, I'm a big supporter of community music and community making. It's neat to see that other people were following him. Floyd was making, Floyd St. Clair did the Edgar Thomas Steelworks Band. He dedicated a piece to him. So these other, it was nice that this band existed and people were excited about it, and that's what I want to cherish. I will talk really quickly about how it disbanded. It was really kind of brought to a lot of attention that as fast as the band was created, as fast as it disbanded. So right here we have a picture of the band in South Bethlehem. They had about 90 members composed of employees. Again, industry band, it's meaning that all employees had to be an employee, except for a few exceptions, were in the band. There was a club parade, an Elks convention that was happening in Bethlehem. And I don't know if you're familiar with the American Federation of Musicians. They have a union side of band. It actually still does exist today. And it's to help folks and musicians not kind of, what I always say, not get paid and not get the things that they need. And I'll say it that way. So they govern a lot of the performances. Well, this industry band was not a part of that particular union structure at that time. Well, they would go on parade, and the union band was upset because they were non-union and the industrial band was not a union band. So the union bands didn't even want to march the parade. So it started this kind of back and forth between this union, and what could have occurred was the Bethlehem Steel Company Band could have just became a union band at that particular point, but that's not what happened. But that was kind of the start of the disbanding of the band. Also, it was, at that time, I think like most of their members started going and kind of moving away, and some members weren't a part of, of the steel plant. We're talking after World War I, we're talking, when the plant kind of had a little bit of a lull, so there was not as many employees at that particular time. So I think that's what it starts. I don't think as many people were involved. The facility, the rehearsal hall, that Joseph Weaver House, was actually given to the Bethlehem Library, who was struggling at that time. And the plan for the library was that once they were done using the rehearsal hall, they were to give it back to Bethlehem Steel. That was the plan, which did occur once they found their own place, and it was given back, and then it actually was sold. And it became part of the Moravian Church and Moravian Academy. A lot of the equipment went to Lehigh University. As you see, there's a picture up here of apple blossoms. This was from Dr. Diggs, that was at Lehigh University. He actually sent me a picture, and I think the first 100 of his library is from the Bethlehem Steel original library, music library is what I'm talking about. So a lot of the equipment from the band was scattered to most of the local schools and local areas so that other bands could cherish and use the music. It wasn't just, as I always say, thrown out and gone. This might be one of the last photos of what I saw. Was 1925 that they were disbanded. To be honest, I've been talking to people, and it might be a little later than that. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but this is what I know. Because this picture here was probably the last photos. It was courtesy of one of the band members, which I'm going to talk about in a second, from his name's Tom Lambert. His family played in the band, and he swears it was past 1925 at that particular time. But this was them in the hall performing. What's neat, and I always like to point out, is two things. In the back, you see the Bethlehem Steel Company Band, which is a actual bell, if you can see that. Allentown Band has the same kind of thing. So if you've gone to any of the Allentown Band concerts, they have that kind of instrument. I also want to point out that there's a few sousaphones in the back. There's actually 4, and we're going to talk about one of them that I know where it is right now. And again, you can see that the performance, but I want to point out to where the boxes are. I think it was Richard Lambert, who's clarinet, and John Lambert, alto sax. And as I said, I'm still trying to learn more of the story. This was shared with me during an event we did last year, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But again, I don't know if it's 1925, but that's what I have read, and again, that's where we're at. So that's why, like I said, and I'll go back to it. If you have more information, please do share, because that would help us out. This is the DeVay building at Moravian Academy. So this is the original building. On the right is the original hall, okay? It's still being used today. I wanted to point out that if I showed you the rehearsal hall, I was asked by the headmaster, gave me a picture, and that's in their library. And that circle up there, if you can see, is up in the top. So those neat decor still does exist a little bit today. I haven't been in the building yet. I've been trying to get in the building. That's actually one of my goals. And I'm gonna, if I can, I'm gonna take some more pictures and try to match it up with everything. But when I approached this a few years ago, as you know, with schools and everything, I have to be courteous with everything. So I just haven't gotten into it yet or find a time to do so. But I wanted to point out in the top left and on the top right, you can still see this on the building. There's 2 emblems, one being, which is actually on my shirt, which says BSB, and then another one on the right that's actually a lyre. So when the building was redone, they put that on the building. So even though that most of you probably drove past it and haven't seen it, it'll show that the Bethlehem Steel Company Band used to rehearse there. And that's a little closer picture so you can see what I'm talking about. At Liberty High School, there is a con sousaphone, which is called Big Bertha. Now, it wasn't called Big Bertha during the Bethlehem Steel Company Band days. Reason why it's called Big Bertha is because of all the high school students that carry it. If you know anything about sousaphones, it's heavy. It's one of the heavier con instruments. Most of them are usually around 35, and I think this is a close to a 40-pound instrument. So it's not necessarily been on the field recently. It does still exist. The current band director was telling me it's been stored, but that's what it looks like. So that's one of the sousaphones from the pictures that still exist. There also was a second sousaphone that I believe before I used to play in a lot of the community groups around here, and I always joke, I think I marched with it because one of my friends owned it, and unfortunately I'm still looking where it went because he passed away, so there is another what we call twin of Big Bertha, I think that's out there as well. That is out there in the world, in the wild, I'll call it that way. Here's some of the archives, Steelworkers Archives are actually here today, and I want to point out that they do have a table in the back with a lot of this memorabilia that you see in the picture, so you can actually look at it and look at it close. But this Earl Rush Steelworkers Archives, of what I know, got a phone call, and one of the family members of Mr. Rush had all his equipment, and rather than, again, I keep saying this, throw it out, it was given to them so that we can still see it today. And as you see, there's 2 hats, so obviously the uniforms have changed. The one in the left-hand corner obviously has the I-beam in it, the one on the right does not. But you can see it's the Wanamaker and Brown Company made the uniforms in Philadelphia. There's some pins too as well that was used on the uniforms. There's a picture of Earl Rush. I met some of the family of Earl Rush who came to a performance that we did when we recreated the Bethlehem Steel Band, and it was kind of neat to see them. There's also a drum and sticks and a case and a stand that still does exist. Susan Vitez who's no longer with us, was very helpful with when I started this research process, and it was exciting to hear that there was stuff out there that still does exist that we can talk about and see. Also, I like to just bring this up really quickly, that once the band did disband, there was a band prior to that called the Fairview Band that disbanded around the 1900s, and it seemed a lot of the players came from there and then also went into the industrial band, the Bethlehem Steel Company Band, and then went on from there. What I mean by that is Ray Weatherhold was a trombone and composer. He then played with the Allentown Band and Symphony. Joseph Recapita was a trumpet. He organized the Bethlehem Municipal Band, which still does exist today. Does a lot of performances in the area and up at the Rose Gardens. He was also the Bethlehem High School band director, and that's a picture of him at the 50th anniversary concert. He was involved with the band. And I want to bring this next slide up to you. Actually, I'm going to skip this for a second and talk about this, and then I'm going to talk about that. We recreated a year ago, actually to today, it's kind of funny, during Music Fest, over at the Music Fest Cafe, we recreated the Bethlehem Steel Company, what we call Legacy Band. And that band performed last year at Music Fest Cafe. We had over 50 musicians. We didn't necessarily do a program from what they did, meaning the exact same lineup of music, but we took music from what I saw was published and played from different concerts of them. It was very well received, and we're actually doing that here on October 12th at 2 p.m. during Steel Weekend. So we're super excited about that. I will say this, if you are a musician and would like to play in it, you can actually sign up and do that. And what I mean by that is we have the rehearsal the night before. We're going to have it on Saturday. Beforehand, we're going to rehearse together, and then we're going to do the concert the next afternoon. So anybody can participate. In that performance, we had people of all ages. I even had a gentleman who lives in West Virginia who was at Bethlehem High School back in the day when it was called Bethlehem High School. I say it that way because he's an older gentleman who came to this concert because he wanted to play so badly for the community. So if you know anybody or interested, please let us know, because the performance is actually going to be right here upstairs, hopefully, and rehearsing. So I wanted to point that out. But I wanted to really talk about one last thing, was there is a piece that was written for the Bethlehem Steel Company Band by a gentleman by the name of George Rosencrantz, who is from Penfield, Pennsylvania. He wasn't a really successful businessman, because I always say it this way, he'd give out arrangements for 50 cents back in the day, but a lot of his music, and I think he unfortunately passed away very poor, but a lot of his music is still played in the area. And as you can see here, it was actually dedicated to the Bethlehem Steel Company Band. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to exit out of my presentation, and I want to play for you what we did at Music Fest 1 year ago today, so that you can hear Greetings to Bethlehem and hear what it sounds like. Thank you. I appreciate everybody coming here and listen. And I thought we'll take a few questions if you have any. I know if you haven't figured it out, we're getting this recorded, so we do have a mic that's being passed around. If you have any questions, just so that they can kind of capture the audio. So don't be bashful. Anybody have any questions? Nobody? I explained it so well. Here we go.
I was wondering of the 90 or so members in the Bethlehem Steel
Sure.
Band, what percentage of those were actual mill workers, shop floor workers?
As far as I know, and so the question was about of the 90 or so members, how many were in the mill and shop workers? Of what I know, of what I read, I don't think too many were of the management. So of what I know, and I say it this way, I think almost 100% were the mill workers, except there was a few and far between that might not have been that. And what I mean by that is, I'm talking to you like a band director right now. So if we need an oboist, and there's no oboe in the, that's working, we might get a local musician to kind of come in. But as far as I know of everything I read, it was all the actual steel workers. And I don't think of anybody who were in the management or anything like that, as far as I know. Any other questions? Oh, that's Linda. You mind reading that back? Thank you.
Even though, because I know you said there was soccer and there was bands related to the steel stacks, was there any other extended activities not related to that had to do with the steel or with Bethlehem?
As far as I know, you mean other activities that dealt, that they were offering for them? As far as I know, I heard, and again, I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure, but I heard there was other, what I call benefits of being an employee here at Bethlehem Steel. And there was other activities going on, and I don't know exactly what they were, other sporting activities. I just know of the football club, which was the soccer club, just because they won so many. I'm assuming, and again, this is just assuming, there was basketball and different other daily activities, along with music, if that helps.
Got it.
Yeah, I think that's a great question.
The march that you just did.
Yes.
I can't remember the name of it. That one and Steel City, is it available public domain if you want to get a
Yes, it is.
copy of it?
Yep. Both of them are. There's actually I think it's bandmusicpdf.com, and you can actually go on there, and they're out of publish, and you can look at them. Their scores are there.
And the second one is called what again?
Greeting to Bethlehem.
Greeting.
Yep. Yeah. It's kind of fun because I always say this. There's Greeting to Bangor, Maine is another piece, and they wrote these pieces obviously to the community for the different bands. But you'll see underneath it'll say dedicated to the Bethlehem Steel Company Band. But yeah. And if you come in October, we're going to be playing both of them. So, any other questions? Well, hey, I wanted to, first of all, thank all of you for being here. I really appreciate it. It's just a great thing to come and just hear about history, especially about music. The reason why I do these is just for the reason of helping others understand what existed before us so that we can continue making music. That's kind of my goal in life. I also want to thank the National Museum of Industrial History for hosting us, and Katie and Andrea. We're super excited that the October concert is going to be here, and we hope that you come to Steel Weekend to see that. I also want to thank the Steelworkers Archives, who does have a table back there. They do have a membership form if you're interested in getting a lot of information. They've put together a lot of great newsletters and history and all of those kind of stuff, as well as back on there. And Joe, thank you so much for being here. Also, I want to point out, I do have my business card back there. Not that I'm trying to sell you anything. That's not what I'm trying to do. I have my business card. If you're interested or know anybody who wants to be in the band, you can contact me. It has all my information there because I'm trying to encourage anybody and everybody to come out and do this great performance here during Steel Weekend. So thank you so much, everybody.